with, we might go from the top of my screen is Mark. So Mark, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure thing. Thank you, Joy. So, hey everybody, my name is Mark. I am the Director of Startups at BDO, which is a large global accounting firm that typically specializes in, I guess, the mid-market all the way through to ASX or publicly listed companies. I guess in context of this conversation, the best thing that I can say is that I'm not an accountant, which means that if I'm doing your bookkeeping, we're all in trouble. What it does mean though is that like my role specifically around early stage high growth companies came about in part because of my background, both as a financial planner, but then as the director or as the city manager at Fishburn as the co-working space for early stage tech startups. And what we found was that at Fishburn, as a lot of the companies that were starting there had really great ideas and really passionate founders, they just didn't really understand the process of which to actually start, launch and scale a company. And oftentimes, because I was, my background was in financial planning and in particular making sure that people understood, I guess, their personal financial situation, but the risk of which they were taking, particularly in a business context, if they were going to start a business. One of the things I was finding is that a lot of brand new founders were looking to do things like remortgage their house to build an app with an idea that they hadn't validated and had no customer feedback or even knew if there was an actual problem they were trying to solve. And so what I was looking to do when I came to BDO was to help early stage founders to be able to create the financial literacy skills and the financial management and business management skills to be able to scale a company that had shown some product market fit. But I guess typically speaking, there's three things that kill a company, particularly an early stage high growth company like a startup. One is no product market fit, designing something that people don't want to use. Second is running out of money, which is typically where BDO comes in, is to try and make sure the companies have an understanding of their financials and how to resource their company. And then lastly is either co-founder split or a solo founder finding it really tough to continue on, particularly in a situation much like a coronavirus. So from my point of view, I guess in summary to this particular panel, I see a lot of early stage high growth companies, some that have amazing opportunities, some that are struggling to be able to find a client base. And from my point of view, the biggest thing that a business needs at the start is a market or a group of people that they're trying to solve a problem for. And so if there's anything I can do to be helpful today in this session or moving forward as a friend and a mentor of this particular cohort, happy to be helpful.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Mark. And lovely to hear a lot of the words that I just used reiterated in what you just said. So, and I know you weren't here for the whole time, so that's good. So thank you for that. Wonderful. Very good. All right. Ali, we might jump to you if you want to introduce yourself, a bit about yourself.
Hello, everybody. I hope that you are all doing well amid of this pandemic. My name is Ali Mirza, and I am from University of Southern Queensland. I'm a senior lecturer in geotechnical engineering, lecturing a number of core subjects in engineering, including geotech engineering, which is a core subject for civil, mining, environmental, and agricultural engineering. So most of the students in university who are going to become engineer one way or another way should come to me and pass the subject, and then they can graduate. Orlando is there. He was one of my students actually. I can see him. He's happy now. I am also a senior researcher in Center for Future Materials associated with University of Southern Queensland. I have my research group in mining geotech engineering, and I supervise a number of PhD students, master student, as well as undergraduate honors student. I have been also chief investigator of a number of national level research projects, including 3 ACOP supported Australian Coal Association research program supported research project, each $250,000. What I can contribute to this mentoring is how to do systematic research studies for products to bring it to the next stage that they are. I believe many products that we have are good as as they are. However, with further research, we can make it better and better and bring it to the point that can be used by end user. And that's where I can be useful, and I can help mentees to get to the point that they can develop strategic plans to get to a better position compared to one that currently are by doing systematic research study. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thanks for that, Ali. Excellent. And yes, good that you've seen Orlando is with us. So great that he can be here today. And Prashant, I know we heard a little bit from you before, but the other mentors maybe haven't heard from you. So we'll get you to do your little intro again.
So thanks for that. So essentially, yeah, my background, yeah, a fair few number of years in the design of oil and gas and power sector, power plants, worked in few countries, had the opportunity to do that. Moved to Australia in 2005. After moving here, I was involved in the Zero Gen project, which was a first of a kind for a few years, and then moved on to the coal seam gas sector. There again, I was a study lead for one of the larger developments, and had the opportunity to apply certain uncertainty-based decision-making models, which I often subsequently teach at the University of Queensland, where I'm an adjunct faculty. I teach those to the master students there. So I hope to share some of these things, particularly, and sort of, I was taking some notes of what Joy has been saying, and certainly there are biases that we need to overcome. There's the need-based innovation, which is very, very critical. But more importantly, I think where possibly I can bring value, knowing well Mark's background and Ali's rich experience. So I think where possibly I can complement is really understanding how randomness and optionality comes about, and how we can, particularly these times, who would have thought we would be all working from home. I was planning to come have a nice drive to Toowoomba, and we had some different plans, but here we are. So really about understanding uncertainty and the optionality amongst randomness, which I think is far more relevant for startups. And then understanding what decisions, because everything that we come up towards a product, and again, the minimum value product perhaps is a proposition, but then it's really trying to understand how we can analyze the decisions we need to make, and how we can facilitate those multiple decisions that finally lead to success. So hopefully I can add towards those areas. So that'll be my key pitch today, having seen and heard from the other facilitators.
Wonderful. Thanks for that, Prashant. And I think that's actually a really good point. And I know it's something that we see, and it's a balance, I guess, for a lot of startup founders, and in particular, but also even for existing businesses that maybe do something quite well already and are looking to branch out, bring on a new product, maybe enter into a new market, is the balance between a gut feeling and how something feels, as opposed to the research involved and the analysis of the data that's been collected to make a decision to move forward. And, you know, we hear the term analysis paralysis. It's like, oh, I don't have enough data yet. I can't do this yet because I don't have enough. On the flip side of that, as Mark said, you know, people remortgaging their house to build an app to do, and they've got no customers and no idea if the problem is there. So I guess, and Krishan, I might start with you on that, is where do you see that happy medium between I believe in this and I've got enough data to proceed?
That's a good question, because since I joined Arrow in 2013, I've been involved in certain deployment of certain technologies and new technologies which hadn't been tried before. And recently patented products. So there's always that challenge. We as business owners, initially I had to sell the idea within the company. It was a very radically different product. It was core components of the compressors that we were These are compressor valve. This was a compressor valve technology that I wanted to trial be based on a pain that we were having, and obviously aspirational gains that we were wanting to have. So there is always this tension in terms of testing something new, and from a startup perspective, trying to make a case. And the way I do believe there's always a middle ground, and that is to understand, firstly, what is the risk. So once we are able to quantify and mitigate and have some risk management approach, we are able to come up to a solution that can be worth trialing and giving some sort of developing confidence in what the startup has to offer. So taking an example for this, so this was a compressor valve that was patented in 2013. Development started in 2010, and in 2015 we were the first, amongst many. In fact, Shell hadn't globally ever even thought about using this technology, and so I selected a particular stage of a compressor, which was the most problematic, and selected 3 different kind of machines. So we scaled the problem down to a manageable level where we could monitor it. So I had some advanced instruments brought in, and we monitored before and after. And then we had certain KPIs set out, which were based on the improvement I was looking for, rather than only looking at what that startup promised. I really was after relieving my pain and posting some gains. So it's really, in short, trying to simplify the problem and make it palatable in terms of quantifying smaller gains or alleviating certain pain. So that perhaps is something that can enable startups, instead of pitching the whole thing, and that sort of is in line with the minimum value product that you were describing there. It's important, and once we established that well and truly beyond doubt that this was working, it was like a no-brainer, and the management wanted to extend it even beyond what I was originally proposing. So those are I think that's an important way, is to understand, quantify the risk, and start off in smaller bites that can be managed, not only in terms of economic perspective. Really, here the economics wasn't the concern. It was really managing the information that comes out of it, whether it was quantifiable and whether it was enough to demonstrate beyond doubt that this was indeed something that we wanted to pursue. And had we had a failure, then I had backup plans in terms of changing certain components within that. Now, being a small test scope, that was something we could do as well. So we had backup plans for what would go wrong, and then how we were going to manage that to give the best opportunity for this technology to be a success.
Wonderful. Thanks for that, Krishan. I think it's good to recognise as well that a lot of this internal innovation within organisations does take a very similar approach to someone starting a startup. So a lot of those lessons translate really well. Something that I think is potentially a challenge for those who aren't internal, and Mark, this might be something that you have seen and had some experience with, is how to find the right people to talk to identify those pains and gains that someone is having, that you believe that they have, but you're not internal. You don't have that on the ground experience in the moment. So how do you find the opportunity to gather that data, have those conversations, build those relationships in the early stages to be able to start to gather this information that you need? So sorry, Mark, I threw your name in there.
Joy. That's it. What a $1 million question that one is. So look, I guess this is the art of startup, right? So the idea of having an early stage high growth company is, like, in order to create something that is economically viable, you need to be able to create something of value to somebody who can pay you for it, right? One of the biggest ways I can tell whether or not a startup founder is getting closer to product market fit is if they can design it like that. They can describe the problem from the point of view of the person experiencing it, not from their point of view as the person creating a solution for it. And it's very different. And so I guess when it comes to finding the people and access, look, I'm mindful of the fact that that's very different depending on the type of business or startup that you're creating. But if you're looking at doing something for enterprise, or you're looking to do something for large companies that typically have large balance sheets, have like, quite a sophisticated procurement system, you have to understand there's probably going to be multiple stakeholders. And what I typically tell a startup who is targeting, say, a BDO or a mining company or a university is that there's at least 3 really important users, possibly 4, that you need to get on side before you can even get to the point of which you can actually even start to pitch people. The first is an internal champion, and the internal champion is someone like me, someone who has a soft spot for innovation, wants to be engaged, and needs to find people who are doing interesting ideas because it's part of my mandate of my job. The second is the check writer, who is the manager or the director or the chief of product or the chief of CTO, CIO type person who actually sign off on it. And for them, there needs to be an economic benefit to actually looking to partner with or procure from you. The third is the actual user of the product or the device that you're looking to create. Oftentimes we find that even if you have a champion and even if you get this, the check writer to sign off on it, oftentimes you'll actually not get infiltration into the company if you haven't got the users on board and you haven't been able to create some sort of positive experience around changing their job on a day-to-day basis. And then lastly, for large companies, oftentimes there's a procurement team as well, and there's like a list of requirements and responsibilities and restrictions and things the procurement team needs in order to be able to sign off on you becoming a new vendor for them. And so in regards to how to find those people, you find those people in very different places. If you're looking for someone like me, like a corporate innovation champion or someone who is engaged with startups, you're looking at places like the Precinct or the places like the Startup Hubs, Innovation Hubs. You're looking at these types of conversations and these webinars. It's pretty easy to find me because I'm pretty much very close to your world. If you're thinking about a check writer, then you have to understand where do the directors and where do the executives of the type of companies you're looking to deal with, where do they go and what do they talk about, and what are the conferences or what are the relationships or what are the places you can meet those people if you're looking to go straight from a top-down approach. Procurement, bless them, are a funny beast. They don't tend to necessarily have procurement conferences per se, but definitely there is obvious, like they don't get an awful lot of love. So there's definitely ways to speak to procurement teams of large organizations. Oftentimes you just need to be mindful that they're not the most innovative, so they're not always the best place to go from a starting point. But then if you're looking at users, like one of the best things you can do obviously is to get pilots across the line where people who use your product or your system or your service will speak either informal situations on a testimonial or informally be able to like refer you through to other people and other companies that they've worked for. Often a warm introduction is by far the best. And so if I'm thinking about building up a network to be able to ask those specific questions around product and market fit, like try and make sure that you understand the problem from the point of view of the person you're trying to solve it for. So you can describe it in the pain points that they have, not the pain points you observe them to have. But then second of all is being able to break down into those four different slots: the check writer, the champion, the user, and the procurement team. And then obviously try and reverse engineer opportunities to be able to spend time with them if you're looking to get feedback. And for me, if you want to get inside someone like BDO, I'm a wonderful concierge through that, or a connoisseur of options there. So from my point of view, it's always a case of trying to find someone on the inside of the company who could be helpful, that can introduce you to the people that you need to speak to. Does that make sense?
Certainly does. And I had a slide, I'm actually just going to flip to it right near the beginning of our day today. And we talked a little bit about it yesterday, but last week, well, yesterday, the days just blend together. Oh, here they are. So pretty much the same, yeah, the different names, but same thing. And it is important to really think about who those people are, where they sit and where you can find them. So that's great. Thank you for that, Mark. So Ali, I might jump to you as well. So you mentioned something a little before, and actually I'm actually going to stop sharing, and then maybe we can see each other a little bit bigger as well, which is nice. So you mentioned around the strategy and the planning of the research for developing product. So do you just want to talk to us a little bit more about that, particularly in lines with someone who might be maybe looking to do their first pilot or their first, go at bringing something to life, how they can actually plan that and create that strategy? And maybe if you, I don't know if you have a core set of steps that you follow or principles that you follow to do that.
Very good and difficult question to answer. So just going a bit, to the past, to the last question that you asked, just want to say something. For me, I am quite still young. I'm 30 years old. And as an immigrant to Australia, it was always difficult to get to the market and to know right people. I found that the right way to go is to find a mentor who is already in the right track in my field. So that was where I could try to use his connection and then get to the point that I am at the moment. So simply, sometimes at the beginning, it is important to collaborate with others. And sometimes you need to share some of your ideas with others to get some suggestion and also to get benefit of the connections that they have so that you can get to the next point. Going through strategies and planning of research. So we have to first understand who is the person or the market that we are going to sell or idea to. And then we have to come up with a holistic, let's say, research plan to get the product to the next stage. In my opinion, any strategy or any research plan consists of a number of steps. The first one is to carry out a comprehensive literature review. So we are not after inventing the wheel again. So we want to see what other researchers have done in the field that we are. And then we want to put our feet on the shoulder of previous researchers, previous inventor, and get to the next stage. Once we have done that one, then we can see what has been done, what is the gap, and what we want to fill up. Then we understand what we want to get, what are goals and objectives. Now we need to come up with a comprehensive plan and a strategy to get to that point. The strategy can be experimental studies, so we can develop an experimental procedure and then carry out experimental analysis to get to the point, or it can be development of mathematical or numerical modeling, or it can be surveying, or it can be just collecting data from various fields. And then based on that, we can come up with a comprehensive model. Again, here the question will be, which you asked a little bit, which you asked before, is which point we can say our research is comprehensive or a strategy is comprehensive. To me, your research is comprehensive when the data that you collect shows some sort of trend to us. We can see that the trend, we can observe a trend within the data. Also, we should have accuracy and precision within the data. Based on all that we have, now we can conclude if the plan that we have done is correct, has been something that worked for us or not. So in a nutshell, if I want to answer this one, any research strategy should follow different stages of literature review, experimental plan, modeling of the plan, and analysis of the data, analysis of the collected data. To come up with the strategy, we have different models to go. Model can be experimental, can be analytical, numerical, just simply collecting the data through question or interviewing with the right people. And again, we have to see what are goals and objectives. And based on the goals and objectives, we have to develop all research plans. Yep.
Wonderful. Thanks for that, Ali. And I think it is that framework. It's going, through those steps and somewhat methodical approach eliminates, I guess, the potential for the bright, shiny thing that we often suffer from. It's like, oh, but I saw this or I saw that. So if we have this, streamlined approach, then that can definitely help. And something that I really liked what you said, and we can forget sometimes is, other people have done a whole lot of work already. If we can stand on their shoulders and just grow from there, we save ourselves all of this time. And a lot of that really comes from conversations, because a lot of that's not out there in the public to see. you know, it's research, it's data, it's hidden, but the more conversations we can have, the more introductions we can get, the more we can learn without having to do the work as such, without having to do all that time and spend that money doing the research. We can learn, oh, this is the data, and I can grow from there. So that's a really good point.
Just one more thing is, always it is useful to find out what are conferences or gathering about the topic that you are doing research as well. So when you go to those conferences, gathering, that can be just a simple Engineers Australia gathering in the town or city that you are, or it can be national level or international level conferences. And by going there, not only you can see the right people that you need to connect to, sometimes you can see big people from industry, from universities, from CSIRO, CSIRO and other companies, but also you can see what research they have done. They come to you, so somebody like, I don't know, a researcher may have done research for bloody 4 or 5 years and just come to the conference and present all findings in 20 minutes. And you can see what they have done and get it from there. So there are a number of benefits from going to these conferences and gathering. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. And sorry, I just saw something pop up in the chat that I just have lost now. That's all right. I might, David, did you have something, did you post something there that you wanted to add? I just can't see it now.
Yes, I did, Joy. So I had a question really from Ian, actually. He was just wondering whether anyone had developed a set of guidelines on how innovators should use the capabilities of university types to help drive successful commercialization, e.g. literature or research, and questions on the implementation and the 80-20 on product features, etc. So if got anything that you might be able to add there, Ali?
Yeah, look, the reality is university doesn't belong to anybody and it belongs to the government of Australia. So the good thing about university is when you come to university, you can be confident that your idea is there, IP belongs to you, well, it's shared with the student that is working, and the cost is minimum and the money is going to be used for the benefit of the country. So from my point of view, it is always good that you collaborate with university. What you have in university is a number of state-of-the-art equipment that you cannot access outside of the university. So, and also you have a number of staff, academic staff who are experts in specific areas. Usually they are on top of the literature. So the time that you need to put forward to go through literature review, finding the gap, and even connection with other people, usually those academic staff already have done it, and that's why they are in that point. So if you go through university website, that can be different universities across Australia, you can see we have a staff that they are expert in different topics. You just simply need to find the right staff and then start to collaborate with that staff, and then take it from there. So in that collaboration, you can talk about your idea, you can talk about using the lab, you can talk about possibility of having a master, undergraduate, or PhD student to fully focus on your idea, to develop it, to bring it to the next stage. And that's where actually you can use the expertise of the academic staff in doing a systematic research studies to bring it to the next stage of your idea or your product. Usually when you talk to universities, universities gonna ask you to sign a contract which is like confidentiality, and that means that the IP really belongs to you, and also the student that is working will have some benefit out of that, but you can usually negotiate with the university about that. If you are going to carry out pure research studies, usually there is no cost on top of usually the scholarship of the student, which is not that much, and you can take benefit of using all the equipment that you have. However, if you go through commercialization, like if you say that I have a product and I want to carry out some research studies on that and give me a report, they usually charge you for that. But the money again is used just for the technical staff, or later on for promotion of the university, because you know that university, as I said, doesn't belong to anybody. So the money should be used by public again. So my experience from the beginning, from working in different universities in Australia, is that They usually take care of the people who come forward with the ideas, and they try to help them. Universities try to help them to bring it to the market. And again, I say ensure that you sign that confidentiality from the beginning, because that's your idea, and at the end of the day, you are the owner of your idea, and you want to make something that you can take benefit of that.
Wonderful, thank you. And yeah, quite a few great points there. Melissa, I might just jump to you, and I'm going to put you on the spot here because I'm not sure how much you know about it, but there's a few different funding opportunities through state government, and I'm not sure whether it's through your department in particular, that actually help with that relationship between an entrepreneur and the university. Are you familiar with those yourself?
Is that any better? Okay. So there is a couple of programs which is that accelerating commercialization, or are you talking about more the CRC and CRCP type arrangements that sometimes... I can't hear you, Joy.
That's because I put myself on mute. There was a knowledge transfer one, and yeah, one of the RDC ones. That's right. We might find some information.
Yeah, there's a few. They come out in different forms throughout. So it's just a case of keeping an eye out. Yeah. That filtering, constant filtering of initiatives.
Things. Yeah, no worries. Very good. Okay. And I think, Mark, maybe you had something to add to that part of the conversation as well?
No, I was just like cheering and celebrating with my little Zoom dance.
Cool. Very good.
It's the only way that it can keep me sane and involved actively while I'm in some of these calls.
Nice. Very good. So Krishan, I might just jump across to you, because obviously, different organisations have different approaches to dealing with, pilots and bringing in startups in particular, or someone who maybe is newer in the stage of business. Have you had any experience with actually seeing that from the internal side, and maybe working with someone who is in that sort of startup phase? Obviously, internally, you've done that with a product that you've developed, but working with an outside organisation and Arrow Energy coming together, or another organisation coming together to work on something in a co-design method. Have you experienced that?
Yes, we have used that while collaborating with certain industry or manufacturer. In one case, it's an ongoing thing, so I can't talk a lot about it. But yes, we often do that. But we also, I have personally engaged with UQ on some of the work where we wanted to have certain reliability gains and areas which were never quantified prior because of the way certain packages are built. And then so I did engage UQ and partnered with them and went through the process that Ali described to come up with a significantly improved solution. So we do collaborate with that. But I do wish to highlight, say, purely from a startup perspective as well, although this was on a larger scale when I worked in Japan. And we were deploying a new technology for flue gas desulfurization. And I think it sort of sits in today's agenda quite well, because we were trying to create a product that was suited for developing countries, project in developing countries, because while we had a suite of technologies which were very well established and deployed in the US, in Europe, and in Japan, there were certain cost implications, obviously, of using the superior technology there. So we had to come up with something that would be better fit, was a better fit and did achieve the same gas cleanup for the developing countries. And so we developed a new kind of absorber and a certain way of treating and absorbing sulfuric acid components within the flue gas. And the approach there is quite worth understanding. Is we broke down the problem into smaller components. And while we were not going to build a full scale, it was impossible to test it on a very large scale. We were going to deploy it on a 700 by 2, so 1400 megawatt power station in Thailand. And so it had to be, and we were standing performance guarantees and of significant penalties if we wouldn't have met those. So there was a systematic process where we broke it down into its elements, and we created bespoke test methods for each of those mechanisms, and then came up with a prototype which could then be scaled effectively. So there was a entire process that we followed while maturing the technology components and leveraging on the literature survey and all the points that Ali raised in terms of, and we had mathematical models, we had certain lab setups where we could simulate the conditions that would be, but more importantly, because there are multiple decisions, as I was highlighting before, in each of these, when we come up with a product, even the smallest product needs certain series of decisions to be made. And within those decisions, there are certain options that we need to choose. And it suddenly becomes a very complex problem. And to be able to navigate through these complex multiple decisions and multiple options, and while ensuring that we have indeed looked at everything that's accessible or possible to create a unique product, it's important to have a systematic process that then ensures that we are not subject to our human biases, and we don't suffer from something that we end up with a product that really has certain limitations. So there's a slightly different process that's possibly used in maturing a product towards a prototype while working either outside the end user or within the end user. So while recognizing these differences, but there are these common elements that need to be respected so that we can come up with a product that meets the minimum value proposition and then has a probability of success that is higher than, or at least reasonable enough to make it a viable business.
Definitely. Wonderful. Thank you for that, Prashant. And I think it's good to recognize that this isn't just something that, that startups face. Every organization faces this when they're making any decision. And if you're needing to communicate, again, it's finding that, it's that language as well as the pain or gain that the person you're dealing with is having. And can you provide them with the information in a way that works for them to be able to confidently make decisions. And I think the point was raised before about, what are those risks and how can you quantify and mitigate and meet that for them at that point. And if you can't, how can you have that conversation around how can we do that together and recognizing what they might be.
Yeah, I think where I wanted to belabor upon and really is really understanding that while a product might be a smaller component, it could be like, I'm looking at some of the examples here and we don't know a lot about what these startups are up to, but it's really about breaking it down into its components and ensuring that we have looked at the entire solution space while making those decisions that build up that entire product. And that has to be done in a systematic manner, going through the literature survey or modeling tools or whatever, so that we are putting our best foot forward.
Definitely. All right. So I think our startups have probably got some great, ideas and concepts from you all already. But I know they're probably desperate to have some one-on-one conversations with you, a little bit more specific around what they are working on and give you that opportunity to learn a bit more, but also for them to find out how they can learn from your experience more specific to their individual needs. So what we might do now is jump out into some